Welcome to The Author Show, where we present new authors and books. From fiction to self-help and everything in between, you'll find it all here. To watch the TV version of our program, visit authorswebtv.com. That's authorswebtv.com. And now, let the show begin.
Hello and welcome back to the show. This is your host, Don McCauley. Today we're welcoming program author Brian A. McLaughlin, and Brian is the author of A Flight Without Wings. After almost 20 years of denial of his near-death experience, Brian came to grips with the reality of it and now has decided that sharing his experience might help those who thirst for the truth about what happens when we die. Brian considers himself to be happy, and even with the limitations that severe head trauma placed on him, he's embraced the peace and clarity gifted to him through his experience. Brian, how are you?
Very good. Thanks, Don. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start with the big question. Tell us about this book, please.
I suppose this book could be considered a realistic account of my experience with death and heaven after sustaining that massive head trauma and dying in a hospital in Mexico 21 years ago. So it goes into what that experience brought to my life going forward and how it's changed me and my perspective on living.
Now, who did you write your book for specifically?
I wrote the book probably targeted to, say, females age 45 and above who may have suffered a loss, someone passing, or experiencing concerns about death and afterlife, and even connections to those that have passed over. I would say males the same age, 45 or above. They all have those same concerns, have thought about dying and what happens and where you go.
Now, could you say there's any type of central message or perhaps underlying theme that you would say runs throughout the book?
Yeah, I would. I would say that the message would be one of goodness, enlightenment. It was an overall positive experience for me in my life, even though I suffered some losses and have had to adjust. I don't think that I would trade it back to be back where I was before the accident. It has brought several revelations to me that I've used in my life going forward to enhance my life.
So if you had to choose, what would you say is the single most important idea you're sharing in your book that's really going to add value to the reader's life?
I would say that the most important thing would be the clarity and understanding that it has brought to me, and I would assume to anyone who reads it, and how I've made it work for me in my life going forward, recognizing opportunities that often come disguised, and the benefits of your relationships with other people in your life. It's a way to approach people differently. I know that I have done that, and it's been a very rewarding experience that I feel anyone could take away.
Now, if you could compare your book with any book out there we might already be familiar with, which book would it be and why?
I suppose that some may find similarities between A Flight Without Wings and probably a well-known A Proof of Heaven or Heaven is for Real, maybe to a lesser extent, in as much as they seem to be based on the same event. It's what some people call a near-death experience. The way mine is written is a little different from those that are people more familiar with, but in its essence, it starts out with the same event that is just handled differently or presented differently. I have a tendency to be a little bit more open and transparent about my presentation. I don't feel that I've exaggerated it or embellished it in any way, and that's what I bring to the reader, is my honesty, and I allow them to come to their own conclusions about it, about what this heaven is, whether it's a place in their mind for them, or whether it's an actual place with a zip code. For me, it's satisfying enough, and I'm convinced enough that that's what it was. That's what it was for me. I don't claim to prove that to anyone scientifically, but everyone can draw their own conclusions. Different people believe different things, different nuances of events, and it allows the reader, I think, in getting just the facts in an honest, unexaggerated way, it allows them to adapt it to their own life and their own beliefs.
So how does the book compare with other similar stories, would you say?
Well, that's a little more difficult for me to answer, Don. I haven't read any other accounts of near-death experiences. I haven't read A Proof of Heaven or Heaven is for Real, so it's difficult for me to actually compare it situation for situation. I didn't want to be influenced in any way by having read those accounts. I wanted my words to be just what I saw, what I felt, and not to be influenced by anyone else's account. some of these accounts, although not having read the book, I was able to see different little excerpts or reviews about them and realize that there's a big difference between my book and those ones I've mentioned, in as much as I had the experience, I wrote the words, and I didn't embellish on them in any way. It's simply what I felt, what I saw, and just some references to my life and how it affected me going forward.
Needless to say, a great deal of skepticism regarding books of this type. What would you say to skeptics?
I would say, first, I suppose I would ask them if they noticed the empty seat in the skeptic section when they came in, and I would tell them that's where I used to sit. I was as skeptical as any. When I had my own near-death experience, I spent a good 8 to 10 years looking for some excuse for it to be something other than a near-death experience. It was a scary thought. It was hard to accept that I was that close to finality, that close to leaving my family behind. And it convinced me through many years, those 8 to 10 years of looking for some excuse. And all that while, there were instances and unexplained epiphanies that I had in my life that brought me to the realization and the satisfaction that, okay, this was a near-death experience, whether it be scientific or religious, that's what it was for me, and I'm satisfied that that's what it is. And the skeptics, I can't necessarily convince them, certainly not scientifically. If it's faith-based, if a person has some faith in their life, they may find it more believable than would the scientist. But in any case, I'm not trying to convince anyone or convert anyone, just sharing what I saw and what I felt, and again, how that has influenced my life.
Now, would you say that your book is heavy into religion?
I think there's two components to the near-death experience that covers nearly everyone's opinion. That would be scientific or religious. I'm not a scientist. As I said, I made no promises about proving my experience, and I never really considered myself heavy into religion either. However, after so many years of trying to pass it off as something else, and all the years and circumstances that brought these unexplainable epiphanies into my life, I really can't deny the religious involvement. And I suppose now I might not consider myself heavily into religion, but certainly was a spiritual event for me. And I would say personally it improved my relationship with God and my religion, and I think it could probably do the same for most anyone who reads it.
So what would you say has been your most rewarding experience since publishing your book?
It's been very rewarding to read reviews that indicate a positive experience for the reader. The scope of the reviews that have come in have shown me the different benefits that readers have gotten from the book, and different perspectives that they have, probably because of their different beliefs, has shown me that there's so many different facets and so many different lessons to be learned. I've heard from many people that they've gone back to it and reread chapters because they felt they might have lost something and that there was more to the words than they originally read. And I find that very rewarding that people have been able to adapt it to their own life and have answered questions that they've had, be them varied, be them obvious, be them hidden. They seem to have gotten quite a bit of positive results from having read it. And I find that rewarding.
How would you describe your writing style?
I made an effort in writing this book to present it in a way that I was just sitting down with a friend and telling them about my experience, not holding back in any way, not with any fluff or nonsense, just sort of sharing my thoughts with someone who cares. I'm not trying to impress anyone. As I said before, not trying to convert anyone. It's just as though I'm sitting down talking to someone, almost like I'm talking to you now. It's just a matter of me reliving my experiences, indicating what I've done with them, how they've affected me, how they've affected my family. And in that way, I feel that it's comfortable for people to read. They don't feel threatened by religious doctrine. I'm not trying to tell them that they need to believe this to get anything out of the book or that. It's just a matter of what I saw, what I felt, and hopefully there's room in their minds for them to get something out of it.
So in your opinion, who should buy your book?
We mentioned an age group and males and females before. I think that most people have had occasion to think about dying. I think that many people, if not most, have had occasion to think about what happens when you die, what happened to my lost father, the father that passed away. How did he feel? Was he lonely? Was he scared? Did he know where to go? Those concerns that I think everyone has had in the loss of a loved one or a friend, and even for themselves. That this experience for me has completely eliminated my fear of death. Completely. I have no fear of death. And it's a powerful thing because most people do fear death. And I think that if given some answers and sharing some experiences may lessen that burden on people, my hope is that that's exactly what it will do. I've sat in church and I've listened to different liturgy, Christian liturgy, different words that are said. And one stands out to me is the part of the liturgy where it said that, I guess Christ said, "My peace I give you." And for me, that was one of those epiphanies that I had in trying to explain that peaceful feeling to people. I didn't realize that there was a place in religion that actually refers to that. And so for me, that was some closure. That just stood there with my mouth wide open and said, my God, that's it. That's the peace that I've been trying to explain to people. And if I can get that point across to someone and validate part of their religious belief or even the liturgy, then I'll be happy. Then I'll feel that there was a reason that I was sent back. Hopefully someone will get at least part of what I got out of it.
Well, time is getting very short, so the most important question, where can readers find you and your book?
Well, they can find the book on Amazon.com. You can look it up at Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, at my website at BrianMcLaughlinBooks.com. Any of your local bookstores, privately held bookstores, would be happy to make it available to people.
Well, this has been just great. Our guest today has been Brian A. McLaughlin, and he is the author of A Flight Without Wings. Brian, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thanks so much, Don. Good talking to you.
This is Don McCauley wrapping up another edition of The Author Show. Please share this interview with your family and your friends so that they too may have the opportunity to discover our guest and his work. And why not spread the word on social media? We look forward to you joining us next time for another great book and another great author on The Author Show.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. To contact us, call toll-free 1-877-955-8800. That's 877-55-8800. Or visit theauthorshow.com. Theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.